Rebuttal on Biblical Canon and Catholic Practices. Old Testament Canon before Christ. Your claim that there was no agreed-upon Old Testament canon before Christ exaggerates the lack of consensus. By Jesus' time, the Jewish scriptures, Torah, prophets, and most writings, were widely authoritative as shown in the Dead Sea Scrolls and Jesus' own references, Luke 24:44. The Septuagint, used by Hellenistic Jews, included books like Ecclesiasticus, later adopted by Catholics, but rejected by Protestants and modern Jews. While the Masoretic text became the Jewish standard later, the core canon was functionally established before Christ. Variations existed, but they were not evidence of total disarray. Your argument overstates the fluidity to dismiss the canon's pre-Christian coherence. Completion of the New Testament canon. You correctly note that the books now considered canonical were written by around AD 90, but your critique misrepresents my point. I stated that the inspired writings were complete by the time John wrote Revelation, meaning the texts later canonized were authored, not that the canon was finalized. Debates over books like the Proto-Evangelium of James or the Shepherd of Hermas, and hesitation about Revelation in the East, occurred later during councils like Hippo, 393, and Carthage, 397. These discussions refined the canon, but do not undermine the fact that the foundational texts existed by the late 1st century. Your point conflates composition with canonization, adoration versus hyperveneration of Mary. Your critique, citing John Calvin's view that the Catholic distinction between adoration, latria, and hyperveneration, hyperdulia, of Mary lacks substance, is correct in asserting that this distinction is not of God. The Catholic claim that latria is reserved for God alone, while hyperdulia offers unique honor to Mary as the Mother of God, fails under biblical scrutiny. Scripture commands exclusive worship to God, Exodus 23:5, Matthew 4:10, with no provision for elevated veneration of any human, including Mary. The Catholic distinction, though theologically nuanced, introduces a practice absent from the Bible, where no apostle or early disciple is shown venerating Mary in this way. Catholic theology argues that hyperdulia is distinct in intent, honoring Mary's role without equating her to God. Yet this differentiation finds no clear support in Scripture, which consistently directs all devotion to God alone, Deuteronomy 6:13-15. The practices associated with hyperdulia, prayers to Mary, feasts, and devotions like the Rosary, often mirror worship in their fervor, blurring the line for many believers. Calvin's critique, that the distinction is without meaningful difference, holds weight because these acts risk diverting focus from Christ, the sole mediator, 1 Timothy 2:5. While Catholics maintain that hyperdulia is not worship, the absence of any biblical precedent for such veneration undermines its divine origin. Early church fathers like Irenaeus and Tertullian honored Mary's role but never advocated for her veneration. The development of hyperdulia, formalized centuries later, reflects human tradition rather than God's command. Your non-Roman Catholic perspective aligns with this skepticism, as Scripture provides no basis for elevating Mary beyond her humble role as a servant of God, Luke 1:38. Intercession of saints versus necromancy. Your attempt to distinguish Catholic intercession of saints from necromancy fails to address the core issue. The practice lacks divine authorization in Scripture and thus is not of God, while necromancy, condemned in Deuteronomy 18:10-12, involves seeking hidden knowledge or power from the dead. The Catholic practice of asking saints to intercede by praying to God for the living still consists in communicating with the deceased, which Scripture nowhere endorses. The Bible is clear that prayer is directed to God alone, Philippians 4:6, and no verse instructs believers to seek intercession from departed saints. Catholic theology claims this intercession is grounded in the communion of saints, yet this doctrine, while affirming the unity of the Church, does not biblically justify invoking the dead. The sole mediator between God and humanity is Jesus Christ, 1 Timothy 2:5, and no New Testament example shows apostles or early Christians praying to saints. The book of Hebrews describes believers approaching God directly through Christ, Hebrews 4:16, not through intermediaries like saints. Your concession about discomfort with statues highlights a related issue. These practices, including venerating relics or images, risk resembling idolatry, which Scripture explicitly forbids. Exodus 20:4-5. The Catholic defense that statues are devotional aids, not idols, does not resolve the absence of biblical support for saintly intercession. Early church fathers, like Clement of Rome, focused on prayer to God, not saints. The practice of invoking saints emerged later, rooted in tradition rather than divine command. As a non-Roman Catholic, your unease reflects a scriptural instinct. Any practice directing spiritual attention away from God alone, even if distinct from necromancy, lacks divine origin and undermines Christ's exclusive role. Please comment, like, and subscribe to learn more.